Hey guys, welcome back to the HuntFishTravel podcast. I am your hostess, Carrie Z. We are here. It is Wisconsin. Technically we're recording this in February, but spring is just right around the corner, and I'm super excited about this week's host. We have Landon Hintz, and he is the owner of Whiskey Rivers Fly Fish. The company, as you guys know, I'm on the board for the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. And this year in 2025, the conference is in Eau Claire. So that's super exciting because anytime I can promote Wisconsin, I get the warm and fuzzies. So um, Dana Crossand from Eau Claire, CVB, was like, hey, I've got this great guy you need to interview. And I went onto the website and I was like, smallmouth floats. I don't even know what that means. I got to interview this guy. So, Landon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, let's jump right in because I don't even know what Okay, so what does smallmouth float fishing even mean?
Yeah, so typically when we're doing a float, we're fishing out of for me, my personal program, I'm running an inflatable raft similar to like a Western style drift boat that you'd see on rivers, fly fishing out west, Montana, Wyoming, places like that.
Oh,
So we're
like
putting
a
in
Zodiac or
similar, kind of like a Zodiac, but
okay.
instead of like having the flat back where you'd mount a motor, we've got it set up with a rowing frame. So I'm doing the rowing, controlling the boat that way.
Okay, so why an inflatable boat compared to like a John boat or even like something like I have, which I thought, and I do love my boat, please don't misunderstand, but a
Mm-hmm.
V style boat has its challenges.
Yeah,
You
great,
know,
great question. Yeah. Um, for me personally, obviously, there's no perfect boat out there that does all applications great. But for the rivers that I'm typically fishing, there's a lot of rock, a lot of rapids. So the inflatable boat allows me to access a lot of spots that even a John boat, a flat bottom John boat, or even those hard sided drift boats that you'll see out west, they just really can't access and get into some of these spots that I'm able to get into with an inflatable. So that's kind of what made me go that route for me personally. Very
but
easy to slide into smaller water. You can also fish it on bigger rivers and stuff like that with
but
good
if
ease.
it's lots of rocks like that, doesn't that mean that it's super shallow? And does that like why would there be fish in such shallow water that there would be so much rockiness in?
So a lot of our rivers here in this area, they'll go from being um, faster paced current rapids where you got those rocks, and then a lot of times it tails out into deeper pools, bigger bends. Um, but the rock area, those rapids are actually really great spots for smallmouth at different times
Okay.
of the year. Not always right away in the spring, but as you progress through the summer, temperatures rise, water temperatures rise. Those rocky spots, typically the rapids, are going to have a lot of aeration, which really attract the fish to those spots.
Oh, that makes sense. So
Yeah,
the more oxygen. Oh, okay, that makes sense actually. Kind of like trout. I got it.
yeah, yep,
Okay.
yep,
Yeah.
very similar.
So not
Yep.
necessarily like walleye who are just super lazy little buggers. They're more looking for the oxygen rather than just a free lunch that's floating by.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
And
that makes more.
yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that really attracts me to smallmouth bass is the fact that they're living in these spots, they're living in current, they're fighting against current every day. So when you do hook into one, it's got the muscle to give you a good pull on the line for sure. So they are
I was just thinking that
there's the term for
really
smallmouth, free
athletic.
the fighter. Yep, yep, and yeah, they're not joking when they say free the fighter. You can catch a 12-inch smallmouth and it'll feel like you're getting tugged around pretty good.
That is true. That is true. When you catch bass fishing is always so fun. Whenever I take somebody out fishing for the first time, I always try to take them bass fishing because they're fun to catch and
Hmm.
they're wild to catch. I would never take anybody walleye fishing for the first time because they're boring
Yeah,
to catch.
yeah,
You know, like or
yeah,
trout fishing because they're complex.
yeah,
Bass are easy, not easier, but they're easier to catch, but they're just more fun to catch, or even like perch. Perch can be
Yeah,
really fun
even
to
even
catch.
just more accessible too.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
there's bass everywhere kind of thing. So
totally. So, okay, before we really get into the weeds here, haha, pun intended. Um, that was pretty funny actually. I got to pat myself
yeah,
on the
like
back. Um, so yeah, like with my boat in the spring, I do a lot of, and I'm probably people can yell at me all they want. I don't do it a lot, but it is fun every once in a while to do the whole like nest fishing where you get the bass and you put the lure just outside of the nest, not in the nest because I don't want to bother them that much. I don't want to harass them
yeah,
quite that much. But you do it just close enough where like the mama bass gets super annoyed and they pick up the lure and they go and they move it away. Do I'm assuming that the bass in fast flowing streams, creeks and rivers create those nests as well. But I'm just wondering, like in a lake, it's really easy because there's not a lot of current to wash away the
hmm
debris in those nests. Like, what kind of habitat are those females looking for in the faster moving streams to be able to lay those eggs and to protect them and keep them safe?
yeah. So they typically they won't make beds in like those rapids or the riffles.
Okay.
They will find a spot on the river where it's slower and a lot of times it'll be like on a big bend and if there's like a little bit of a backwater slough or an eddy where it's a nice sandy or gravel bottom out of the current, that's typically where in rivers you'll see them set up
Yeah,
set up set up for
that's
spawn.
interesting.
So
Yeah, I
hmm
was just wondering. I guess the only real experience I really have with bass, when I'm river fishing, I'm targeting walleye, catfish, well, really just walleye and catfish. But
hmm
in lakes, bass or lake trout are my two go-tos, or perch a lot of times because they're
okay.
just dumb,
hmm
and easy to catch when you're not catching anything else.
Yeah,
But or bluegill or whatever. But I guess I never really think about bass on rivers and creeks and streams and such. I guess I always associate creeks, streams, fast-moving water with trout. I
yeah,
never really think about bass, honestly. So that's interesting.
yeah. And it's kind of funny because like when I first got into the whole fly fishing thing, I got into it through trout. That was kind of my
Yeah.
gateway into it. And me and my dad would take trips out west and we'd go to Montana and we'd fish these, iconic rivers out there that sometimes didn't look a whole lot different than the rivers that we had in our backyard here. And I would come home and I'd be like, oh man, if only this river had trout in it, it would be the best thing ever. And eventually I kind of got over that and I started fishing these rivers with fly rods um, and catching these bass and being like, man, I was senile there for a while thinking that this would be better if it had trout. The fact that they're a native fish, I think they fight harder than trout.
Yeah.
I just yeah, I'm glad I got over that little bug of wishing our rivers were full of
Right.
trout sometimes. But
Being a trout
yeah,
snob.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can't remember who it was. Might have even been my dad or my grandpa or something always said that it doesn't matter how shallow the creek is. Every body of water has some sort of fish to catch in it. You just have to
hmm
know what to what to fish for. So,
Yeah,
and like you said, yeah, like you said, like if you just get out of the mindset of it, well, it's got to be trout that's in the creek, you could
yeah,
probably have a lot of fun. That's interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I
hmm
gotta change my mindset too. I just always think of trout, always, 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 and I'm probably
yeah.
missing out on a lot of fun fishing.
Yeah, I have a stream that I like to go to a lot, and it's if you saw it, you'd expect it to be a trout stream. It's about as wide as a trout stream. It's wadable, very wadable. Couldn't really take any kind of watercraft down it most of the year, and it's full of some really healthy smallmouth bass. So it's fun, every once in a while, kind of get out, wade around, catch them on foot too, versus always doing the floats. But
Yeah,
just kind of shows how versatile and accessible they are as a fish.
yeah. What waters do you normally guide on?
I'm typically guiding on like the Chippewa River, the Eau Claire River, the Red Cedar. We're pretty fortunate. I'm in the Eau Claire Chippewa Falls area, and we've got oodles of water right here in our backyard that give us a lot of opportunities to chase them. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
fortunate that way.
So if somebody gives you a call and they say, I want to try this float fishing thingy,
Hmm.
what is the first thing you tell them? Like, what do you tell them to expect compared to, say, a regular just taking the boat out and going fishing for a day?
Well, so we, you know, it's uh, it's a part river trip as well. When you're floating, so you're getting to see a lot of different scenery. The wildlife is, you've got opportunities to see a ton of wildlife as you float down the river. So, um, we'll start at some point upriver, and usually, if it's a full day float, we're probably going to do about 6 7 miles of river. So float down to the takeout, and along the way, at some point of the day, stop, have a lunch somewhere on a rock bar, or a beach like that. So um, that's kind of the timeline of it. But if they're not used to fly fishing, usually we'll start the day off a little bit with some casting instructions and stuff like that, and then once they're comfortable, we'll get out there and start going after the fish.
What if someone's never fly fished before? Do you take out like really, really beginners, or do you generally only take out intermediates or someone who has at least some moderate experience?
I would probably say my clientele is about 60-40 so far, being unexperienced to being very experienced. So I've been able to have a lot of beginners in the boat. Been able to get a lot of people their first fish on a fly rod, which is always a really cool moment. Um, but yeah, it's just as fun taking a beginner out as a seasoned angler.
How many do you get? A lot of people who like have caught their first fish with you on a fly rod? Because how cool would that
Um,
be?
yeah, I mean, I can think of probably, I think I've got 3 or 4 individuals. Very first fish that ever caught on a fly rod was with this. So yeah,
That'd be so exciting to experience with somebody. Because I mean,
yeah,
we get to do a lot of this stuff a lot, and there's a lot of people who love to fish, but real life and life gets in the way or whatever, or there's
yeah.
just people who don't get out as much as they'd like to, or don't even think to try new things. Like my boyfriend, he's like, I don't fly fished. I don't even know how to fly fish. And I'm like, well, you should try it. It's a lot of fun. But
Hmm.
people like him who it just never occurred to him to even try fly fishing because you got to buy the gear and how do you learn? And let's have somebody to
Yeah.
show you, or you have a dad or a mom or somebody to show you, you
Hmm.
know. So I think sometimes we take our firsts, for granted. So how cool is
Yeah.
that you get to experience some of those? That's
Yeah. And
neat.
I even offer a trip where we don't do a float actually, but we go out on a local lake that has a ton of panfish, bluegill, largemouth bass, and that's a very very great way to introduce someone to fly fishing is panfish.
Oh yeah, because they'll eat
They're
anything.
available. They're usually typically very willing to eat. You can catch them on dry flies or little poppers. So it's a
Yeah.
visual eat, which is what gets a lot of people hooked on it, I would say. And just it's super low pressure. You're
Hmm.
not out on a river missing your opportunities as you float by them per se. But you can take it as at your own speed a little bit better on those trips. So that's
Right.
kind of a good way I've found to introduce it.
That's cool. So mentioned that you float down the river. So do you have someone that drops you off up the river and then you float down and you grab your truck and then you how does that work unless you have two people?
Yeah, so either I'll have someone running a shuttle for me, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll go out ahead of time, drop my boat at the put in, and then I'll go down to the takeout, meet the folks there, and then we'll go up, take
Oh, sure. Take their car up
their
there.
vehicle
Okay.
up, yep, and then float down, and then my vehicle's there. I can load up my boat, take them back to their vehicle, drop them
Sure.
off, and head our way. So
Oh, that makes sense. I was just wondering because I was like, unless you're two people, how does that work?
yeah, yeah,
That's neat that you actually literally like float down. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Because you think of so originally when before I looked, when she had mentioned that you did float trips, in my mind I was thinking of those like I've seen them at Shields or Cabela's where you like those inner tubes that you can sit with your legs in and you like
yeah,
float down. And it's
yeah,
similar to that, only you're just in like a rubber raft, which is to me probably more ideal because you can have
yeah,
more gear with you and
yeah,
you know, you have more stuff
yeah,
with you or whatever, cameras or whatever it is. So that's super cool. That's
yeah.
neat.
And like
I'm
the raft,
fascinated with this whole thing.
the rafts that we're using are really stable, you know. So they've got
Yeah.
a really hard inflatable floor, and I have lean bars on the frame of my raft, so you kind of are able to lock yourself in, so you're able to stand while you fish, which I think is a big advantage, especially when fly fishing. But yeah, it's I like to think it's pretty spacious, pretty comfortable way to take in the river.
Yeah. And do you use so you generally only do fly fish or do you use spinning rods too or live bait occasionally throughout
Yeah,
the year?
I'm I'm pretty much fly only.
And is that throughout the whole year or is that
Yep.
generally only in the springtime?
Nope, that'll be all year long.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is okay, so I know we were just kind of talking about bass, but do you target other species too?
Yeah, so I do quite a bit of musky fishing as well on the fly. So that, yeah, you know, so that's a whole nother can of worms. That
I know, right? I'm like, that's so neat. Wait, man, we could talk for like 5 hours. I feel like just on muskies.
yeah, you get me going on musky fly fishing, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's hard to stop.
I know. Okay, we're gonna focus on bass. I
Smallmouth,
promise.
yeah,
I know
yeah,
because maybe we'll do a follow up with muskies because that's a whole other. I have 105 questions about muskies alone, and we don't have enough time for both. So
yeah, and musky fly fishing as a whole, you know, it's
yeah,
a funny little subculture out there. You know, it's got a lot to it, but
I
it's
know.
a lot of fun.
I know. So tell me the different types of techniques you would use to target bass, because I'm trying to focus my brain back on bass and not muskie now. Um, different techniques you would use for bass, say in the spring compared, say in April. Okay, so wait, so let's back up a little bit. So inland um, doesn't open until May 1st, but that's for lakes. But you can target bass in March and April on the rivers as long as there's obviously as long as there's no ice, which
Yep.
might sound weird to somebody living in Louisiana, but it can happen. So, would you use different techniques, say in April on, say, the Chippewa River than August, say?
Yep. Yep. It's going to be a little bit different. Um, and it's going to be kind of the water that we're focusing on also is going to be different. In
Okay.
April, going to be looking for deeper, slower water that the fish are kind of, and in April, it's kind of interesting because you're dealing with migration a lot of times on a lot of our rivers because a lot of our
Okay.
rivers dump into like a reservoir or a lake, and smallmouth move an incredible
Really?
amount. Yep.
Do they?
So, yeah. So a lot of our rivers here locally do drop down into reservoirs or lakes. So in the spring, I'm usually focusing on those sections right above those reservoirs and those lakes because those bass are making their way back up the river to find spawning spots. And then in the fall, a lot of times you'll see the fish drop down to those lakes to winter there. So in April, yeah, we're gonna be focusing on kind of staging spots. So those are going to be spots near current, but where there's like a current seam or a break where they can get back and hold in on slow water and not use much energy. So they're looking for a big easy meal that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to waste a lot of energy to get it. So I'll be fishing usually a little bit bigger flies in the spring, probably between 4 and 6 inch streamer flies, and then I'll be fishing with sinking lines, so a fly line that is weighted. gets the fly down a little bit deeper. Um,
Okay.
versus like August, a lot of times in August you're dealing with shallower water at that point. The fish are moving into shallower, more aerated spots. A lot of times, topwater flies are in August are kind of what's going on. So you're fishing poppers or frogs, stuff like that. Yeah, springtime it's pretty streamer dominated, fishing kind of low and slow in those spots where they'll stage up as they move upriver again.
Tell me a little bit more about migration. I did not know that bass migrated like salmon do.
Kind of, yeah, sort of. And yeah, I don't think smallmouth get as much talk, when it comes to
Yeah, I had no
migration.
idea.
But there's a few times last spring where um, we had some incredible days on the water and patterning those fish. It was definitely that those fish were in a migration pattern and not necessarily even in a pre-spawn pattern yet. So like they're staging up at the bases of rapids and they were just piled in on these spots. So if you're downriver and you're looking back up at a rapids and you're seeing big boulders that are creating softer water behind them, those fish were just piled in behind those boulders and probably just waiting for a little bump in flows for them to make their way further up. But yeah, I heard one story one time of the DNR like tagging a smallmouth bass below a dam in the area here, and by the next day it had swam across the entire flowage and
Oh
up
my
a
gosh.
different tributary.
For
So I
real.
mean, yeah, they can really move.
That's
But
interesting.
yeah,
You really don't hear a lot about them. You don't really hear unless you're really in like the bass tournaments. You really don't hear a lot about bass fishing, especially in Wisconsin. We're so obsessed with walleyes and muskies.
yeah, yeah,
We really are. And that's okay, but you really don't hear a lot about or even salmon. You always hear about salmon migrating. Oh, they're coming in from the Great Lakes up into the rivers, into the tributaries and stuff. And you really don't hear a lot about bass. And that's interesting.
and especially I'd say even river bat, like fishing
Yeah.
smallies in a river is probably even a step below of what you know. I know like you get into the Hayward area in northern Wisconsin, Minocqua. I know up there's a bit of a stronger smallmouth bass culture fishing the lakes, but not necessarily as much on the rivers for sure. I don't think.
That is interesting. I should do a whole episode just on the migration of the bass. People would probably
Yeah,
be like, "What? Mind blown."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Especially
Because
since I'm
you
doing
like
more video now, I could do like all like diagrams and stuff.
yeah, yeah. So like like you said, that the salmon get a lot of that attention as
Yeah,
migrating. But yeah, smallmouth
that's interesting.
do it a lot too. And it's not like every smallmouth leaves these sections of the river either.
Right.
Like these rivers have spots in them where there's a 20-foot hole. And fish can definitely winter in a spot like that. But I think you definitely see the majority, drop back out of our rivers and drop back down to these lakes and reservoirs that are dammed up.
Yeah. How big do the fish in the rivers that you fish? How big do the bass get that you guys are normally catching? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, you know, your goal mark is always kind of a 20-inch fish. Um,
That's big.
you know, that's a trophy. If you break 20 on a smallmouth, that's a really special fish. That's an old fish. That's a fish that's been around, for a long time. Smallmouth do not grow very fast.
No.
I'd say even probably smaller. It's even longer that it takes a fish to probably grow in a river than some of these lakes. But I think it's about 5 years for a smallmouth to get 12 inches
Oh
even.
wow. I didn't
Yep,
know they were that slow growers.
yep. And I think and this is I'm not a biologist
Yeah.
and I could be a little bit off, but I'm pretty sure it's about 5 years to get 12 inches, and then I think it's
Whoa.
about an inch a year after that until they get to about somewhere in that like 16-inch range, maybe 17, and then after that point it slows more and if they're getting like a half an inch a year at that point, that's pretty good. And it kind of decreases the bigger they get.
So when you're catching these 20-inch bass, they're like 10 years old.
At least I would say. Yeah,
Wow. Oh my God, I
yeah,
didn't even
yeah,
know. That's
yeah,
bananas. That's crazy. I had no
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
I'm totally blown away right now. I really am.
yeah. There's I know
Wow.
that's somewhere I've seen like a smallmouth alliance poster, and it kind of graphs it out really well. It shows
Oh,
it and explains
I'll
it
have to find that and share it
really
on the
well.
video. Yeah. That's interesting. That's crazy.
Yep. And
Wow.
I think that's kind of another reason that I think smallmouth bass could use a little bit more attention or advocacy almost, I would say.
Yeah.
It does hurt when I see people, come off the
Come on.
water with a
Yeah.
stringer and they've got, some 17, 18-inch smallies, and it's legal, and,
But they
it's,
don't know. They have no idea. They're
yeah.
thinking that they're just like, and I know a lot of people, it's not that they consider them like garbage fish, but they kind of do. They're just, I don't know. They're just like they're common fish, not,
Hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't have the prestige that a muskie does or that a trophy walleye does or something like that
Yeah.
for some reason.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and a part of me does think, maybe if more people were educated on that, and
Yeah.
had an idea that when they're holding a fish of that size, how much that fish has gone through and spent, to get to that size, that they would maybe not look to keep it, but yeah, so it's kind of crazy, but yeah, you get a 20-inch fish, it's definitely in the double digits of age for sure. I
That's
would almost say
nuts.
maybe even could be pushing, that 12, 13,
Yeah.
age.
Oh, that's crazy. I will have a lot more respect for bass now in the
Yeah,
future because I've probably been just as guilty of it as anybody else, honestly. Because you just
yeah,
don't know what
yeah,
you don't know, and
yeah, absolutely.
so this has been a very fascinating, very educational and interesting conversation. Way different than I thought it was gonna go. Like, I mean, I knew we would talk about float fishing, but
Yeah,
there have been definitely some very interesting like truth bombs here in this episode.
yeah, cool.
So very cool. Well, we are bumping up against time here, so why don't you tell the listeners where they can find out more about you and if they're interested in going on a bass fishing float trip or even a muskie trip, where they can learn or contact you.
Yeah. So my website is whiskey rivers flyfish .com, and all my information on there, email, phone number, ways to contact me if you do have further questions or interested in booking a trip, and all my trip information is on there. Kind of gives a rundown of what to expect on the day of the water. So yeah, and then I'm also on Instagram at Whiskey Rivers Flyfish as well.
All
If you're
right.
on Instagram, you can find me there too.
And I will, of course, link to all these in the show notes at huntfishtravel.com. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me.